The desert shift. The desert has its own kind of silence, and it's not the comforting kind. Out here on the highway, 30 miles from the nearest real town, the quiet isn't soft or restful. It presses down, like a heavy blanket. The only things that cut through it are the low whine of the fluorescent lights inside the gas station, the buzzing neon sign that flickers on and off outside, and the endless hiss of the wind dragging across the asphalt. I've been working the night shift at this station for 3 weeks now, long enough to memorize the rhythm of it. A customer every hour or two, sometimes truckers passing through, sometimes families stopping for gas on their way somewhere better. Most of the night it's just me, the humming refrigerators in the back, and the faint smell of stale coffee that seems baked into the walls. It's boring. Boring in the kind of way you only get in a place where nothing ever changes. I sweep the floors, wipe down the counters, count cigarette packs, and stare at the rows of candy bars until my eyes blur. I drink too much coffee to stay awake, which only makes my hands shake and my stomach hurt. The pay isn't great, but it's enough to cover rent, and in a town like mine, jobs are hard to come by. When the manager offered me the shift, he warned me right away that nights out here could feel different. I thought he meant it would be lonely. I had no idea he meant something else entirely. On my first night, I noticed the laminated paper taped down to the countertop. It was yellowed around the edges, smudged from countless fingers tracing over the words. At first, I didn't pay it much attention. Some stations have safety checklists, what to do in a robbery, what to do in a fire. I assumed it was something like that. But when I finally leaned over and read the list, my skin prickled. It wasn't a safety checklist. It was rules, strict, oddly specific rules, each one numbered neatly from 1 down to 11. They were typed in bold black font, but underneath, in red marker, someone had underlined certain phrases and written warnings in the margins. I'll never forget the first few lines. Never serve the man in the wide-brimmed hat. 2. Do not look directly at the pumps after 3:15 a.m. 3. If you hear knocking from the stockroom, do not answer it. I actually laughed when I read them. It felt like a prank, some kind of weird initiation for new hires. I could picture the manager and the daytime clerks laughing about it, waiting to hear me tell some story about being scared. But the longer I looked at the rules, the less funny they seemed. Each one was precise, almost paranoid. Keep the radio on between 2 and 4 a.m., even if the broadcast is static. 5. If a customer pays with coins that feel warm, do not touch them with your bare hands. Use the scoop under the register. 6. The payphone outside will sometimes ring. Never answer. Yet there were more, each one stranger than the last. By the time I reached the final rule, I felt a chill run down my arms despite the hot desert air still radiating through the glass door. Never remove this sheet of rules from the counter, not for cleaning, not for replacement, not for any reason. In thick red ink, someone had scrawled underneath, breaking even one of these rules could cost you your life. I sat back in my chair, staring at it for a long time. My first instinct was still to laugh it off, but something about the blunt warning in that messy handwriting kept me from peeling the paper up. Instead, I ran my hand across the laminated surface and felt how worn it was, how many people before me had touched it. The rest of that first night passed in dull, forgettable pieces. A single trucker came through for gas, grunted a hello, and drove away. A moth the size of my hand battered itself against the glass door until I shooed it away. With a broom, the hours dragged, and the rules sat there in my peripheral vision, a constant reminder. Now, weeks later, I still find myself staring at them. I've memorized them, though I never meant to. They're etched into my brain now, like the lyrics of a song you never asked to learn. I tell myself it's just because I've read them too many times. But there are nights, long, empty nights, where I feel like the words are whispering themselves into me, making sure I'll never forget. At 11:12 p.m., I clock in. The air outside is still warm, shimmering in the orange glow of the gas station. Canopy. The highway is dark, stretching endlessly into the horizon, and the only cars are distant pinpricks of light, moving in either direction. By midnight, the desert cools, and the silence sets in. That's when I notice how loud the little sounds inside the station are. The hiss of the coffee machine, the faint crackle of the old radio. The manager insists I keep tuned to the AM station, the creak of the building settling on its foundation. Around 1 a.m., my skin always feels clammy, like the night air has seeped through the glass doors. That's when I usually pour myself another cup of coffee and lean against the counter, staring at the rules again. It's not just the words themselves that unnerve me. It's the fact that they've been here longer than I have. Maybe longer than the manager has. The laminated page is faded, but the tape is new. Someone replaces it carefully, making sure it always stays in place. The manager, Mr. Harlow, is a man in his 60s with a face like leather and a permanent squint, like he's been staring into the desert sun too long. He doesn't say much, but on my second shift, I asked him about the rules. He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. Instead, he just said, "Don't break them." That was it. No explanation, no context. Just 3 words, said with such grim certainty that I didn't push him further, so I followed them. I don't know why. Maybe out of superstition, maybe out of fear, but I follow them. And yet, every night I feel the weight of the desert pressing closer. The rules keep me alert, make me wonder if there's something out there in the darkness, something waiting for me to slip up. It's probably nothing. It has to be nothing. But then, sometimes, when I catch a flicker of movement at the edge of the pumps, or when the payphone rattles against its cord though the air is perfectly still, I remember the handwriting in red ink. Breaking even one of these rules could cost you your life, and in those moments, I believe it. The rules, I don't know what kind of person sits down and writes a list like this. Whoever they weren't just jotting down reminders. No, these rules had the weight of a confession, or maybe a warning left behind by someone who already knew too much. It was a slow night, the kind where the clock seems nailed in place. I'd already wiped the counter 3 times, swept the same stretch of tile until the broom bristles squealed against the linoleum. My coffee was cold, my eyelids heavy, and that sheet of laminated paper taped square in the middle of the counter kept catching my eye like it wanted attention. So I gave it some. I leaned both elbows on the counter, propped my chin on my hand, and read it aloud. My own voice sounded too loud in the empty station, bouncing back from the racks of snacks and the humming refrigerators. Rule 1. Never serve the man in the wide-brimmed hat, I snorted. What if he's just thirsty? My voice cracked a little in the stillness. I imagined some cowboy type wandering in, boots clomping against the tile, slapping a bottle of soda down on the counter. What was I supposed to do then? Tell him. To take his business elsewhere? The idea seemed ridiculous. Rule 2. Do not look directly at the pumps after 3:15 a.m. That one was even stranger. Who writes down something like that? Don't look at the pumps? The laminated page didn't explain why. It just stated it plain, like gravity, like a fact of nature. I glanced at the clock on the register. Just after midnight, a long way from 3:15. But the wording stuck with me. What was supposed to happen out there after that time? Rule 3. If you hear knocking from the stockroom, do not answer it. Sure, I muttered, scratching at the stubble on my chin. Just rats or something. Easy enough. Still, the phrasing made me swallow hard. If you hear knocking. Not scratching, not rustling, knocking, like someone or something would be politely asking to come in. I flipped the page a little closer under the counter light. The lamination reflected a harsh glare that made the typed words glow white. Rule 4. Keep the radio on between 2 and 4 bust a.m., even if the broadcast is static. I looked at the battered old radio sitting on the shelf behind me. its plastic casing yellowed with age. Mr. Harlow had mentioned that one on my first shift. Don't turn it off, no matter how much static you hear. I thought he was just superstitious, but seeing it written here, cold and precise, made my skin crawl. Rule 5. If a customer pays with coins that feel warm, do not touch them with your bare hands. Use the scoop under the register. I let out a shaky, laugh at that one. Warm coins? Like somebody pulled them fresh from a dryer? But when I glanced down, sure enough, there was a little metal scoop tucked into a slot below the register. I'd never noticed it before. Rule 6. The payphone outside will sometimes ring. Never answer it. My eyes shifted to the big glass door. Beyond it, under the canopy, the old green payphone stood against the wall, its receiver dangling on a frayed cord. It hadn't worked for years, or so I'd been told. But I imagined the sound of it cutting through the silence at 3 in the morning, shrill and demanding, and felt a chill crawl up my back. The list went on. Rule 7. If you see a child alone in the lot, do not let them inside. Rule 8. If your reflection in the freezer glass looks wrong, do not acknowledge it. Rule 9. Lock the doors at exactly 2:37 a.m. Do not unlock them until 2:47. Rule 10. If you hear someone call your name from outside, do not respond. Rule 11. Never remove the sheet of rules from the counter. Not for cleaning, not for replacement, not for any reason. That last one was underlined in red ink twice, with a jagged, angry hand. At the bottom, scrawled in the same red marker, were the words, "Breaking even one of these rules could cost you your life." I sat back and exhaled slowly, shaking my head. It had to be a joke, some kind of hazing ritual for new employees. Mr. Harlow didn't exactly strike me as the prankster type, but maybe one of the other clerks got bored and cooked this up. Still, someone had gone through the trouble of laminating it, taping it down neat, replacing the tape when it frayed. A long, empty stretch of silence followed, broken only by the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees overhead. I caught myself, tracing my finger along the edge of the paper. The rules didn't feel like a prank. They felt like instructions. I forced myself to laugh again just to break the tension. My voice sounded hollow in the empty station. "All right," I said, raising my cup of cold coffee and a mock toast. "Here's to the rules. Let's see if I can keep them." The desert pressed close on the other side of the glass, dark and endless. I stared out at the pumps under the harsh glow of the canopy lights, their metal bodies standing in rows like watchful sentries. For the first time, I felt a prickling on the back of my neck, the uneasy awareness that maybe something was out there listening, and if the rules were true, maybe it was waiting. First shift, first Omen, there are some hours of the night when the world feels wrong, not just quiet, not just empty, wrong. Like time has slipped off its hinges and the air is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. For me, that hour came at 2:59 in the morning. I'd been staring at the digital clock on the register without meaning to. The glowing red numbers had become a kind of anchor in the stillness, something solid to hold on to. Outside, the canopy lights hummed, drowning the desert in harsh white glow. Inside, the refrigerators buzzed and clicked, the fluorescent bulbs overhead flickered in spasms. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and burnt coffee, and every time the wind rattled against the glass doors, my pulse jumped. I was alone, like usual. No cars for the past 2 hours, no voices, no footsteps, no motion except the moths tapping themselves bloody against the glass. Then, at 2:59, I saw the headlights. They appeared on the horizon like a pair of pale eyes, small at first, then swelling as they drew closer. The beams cut through the drifting dust, illuminating the highway in sharp streaks of light. I leaned forward over the counter, squinting through the glass doors. The vehicle slowed as it approached the station, turning smoothly under the canopy. It was an old car, black, long and low-slung, the kind of car you'd expect to see on a movie from decades ago. Its paint gleamed like oil under the floodlights. The engine idled, low and steady, as the driver's door opened. That's when I saw him. The man in the wide-brimmed hat. His hat was black, felt, old-fashioned. The brim, casting his face into shadow. His clothes were dark too, a long coat that brushed the backs of his boots, hands gloved despite the warm desert night. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step clicking against the concrete like the echo of a hammer driving nails. As soon as he stepped under the canopy, something pressed against my ears. It felt like altitude sickness, a dull ringing followed by a throb deep in my stomach. My throat tightened. I knew without needing to double-check that I was looking at Rule 1 in the flesh. Never serve the man in the wide-brimmed hat. He didn't come toward the door right away. Instead, he stood by the pump, his gloved hand resting casually on the handle as though waiting for me to step out and do my job. That was what clawed at my mind the most. The expectation. I felt it pressing at me from across the lot, a silent command. The clock on the register ticked from 2:59 to 3 o'clock. The man didn't move. I swallowed hard and forced my hands to stay on the counter. I wasn't going outside. I wasn't touching the pump. Every nerve in my body screamed to just get it over with, walk out and fill the tank, but the rules echoed louder in my head. I kept my eyes locked on him, but the longer I stared, the stranger he looked. His proportions weren't right. His shoulders seemed too broad, his legs too long, like he was stretched a fraction past human limits. And though the brim of his hat cast his face into shadow, I had the sickening impression that he didn't have one at all. The pressure in my ears grew worse. I winced, pressing my palms against the sides of my head, trying to block it out. The neon sign above the station sputtered and buzzed, brighter for an instant, then dimmer, as though struggling to hold back the dark. The man lifted his head. Even from where I stood, I felt it. The weight of his attention landing squarely on me. My stomach lurched as though I'd swallowed stones. My hands shook. I mouthed the words to myself over and over. Never serve the man in the wide-brimmed hat. Never serve him, never. We stared at each other across the concrete. The only sound was the wind scraping sand across the lot, the faint hum of the lights, and the deep, unnatural pounding of my own pulse in my ears. I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds stretched like minutes. My eyes watered from not blinking. My breath came shallow, like I was afraid to make a sound. Then, without warning, the man tipped the brim of his hat lower, as if in acknowledgement. He turned, moved back toward his car, and slipped behind the wheel. The engine rumbled once, deep and guttural, before the car pulled away from the pump and back onto the highway. No taillights, no headlights, just gone. Swallowed whole by the desert fog that hadn't been there a moment ago. I stood frozen behind the counter, my hands locked to its edge, my legs trembling so hard I thought they might give out. The ringing in my ears faded slowly, leaving behind only silence. The clock read 3:04. For the next 10 minutes, I didn't move. I couldn't. The air inside the station felt brittle, like one wrong breath would shatter it. When I finally managed to step back, my knees buckled. I sank into the stool behind the counter, clutching my cold cup of coffee just to feel something. Solid in my hands, my reflection in the window stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed, the humming lights flickering above. I thought about calling Mr. Harlow, telling him what I'd seen, but I didn't, because I knew what he'd say. Don't break. The rules. I hadn't, not this time. But the night wasn't over, and the rules, God help me, they were real. The first broken rule, Luis showed up late, as usual. The bell above the glass door gave a half-hearted jingle as he strolled in, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, hair damp from a shower. He grinned at me like he didn't notice the circles under my eyes, like the night hadn't already pressed its weight into my bones. "Relax, man," he said, tossing the bag behind the counter. You look like you saw a ghost." I didn't answer. Not at first. The memory of the man in the wide-brimmed hat still clung to me, sticky as cobwebs. Every time I blinked, I saw that car gliding back into the fog, saw the brim dip in acknowledgement. Louis popped open a can of energy drink, the crack and hiss unnaturally loud in the empty store. He slurped obnoxiously and leaned on the counter, eyeing the laminated sheet taped down beside the register. Still with the rules? He tapped the paper with one finger, smirking. "Man, this is the dumbest initiation prank I've ever seen." "They're not a prank," my voice sounded. "Smaller than I meant it to, thin and tired." "Right." He squinted, reading aloud in a mock-serious tone. "Rule 3, if you hear knocking from the stockroom, do not answer." He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "Seriously? You believe this?" I didn't answer. Louis laughed and shook his head, cracking his knuckles like a man itching for something to do. "I swear the manager must get a kick out of you guys. Bet you I'll jump at Shadows and hand him the best stories." I wanted to argue, to tell him about the man at the pump, the ringing in my ears, the pressure in my stomach, but the words died in my throat. Luis wouldn't believe me. He'd laugh, and I wasn't sure I could say it out loud without shaking. The shift dragged on. Luis wandered the aisles, humming to himself, tapping shelves with his fingers. He ate. A candy bar, without paying, left the wrapper on the counter. He talked about girls, about saving up to leave this town, about how stupid it was that we were stuck babysitting a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I listened with half an ear, eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. The red numbers crawled forward cruelly slow. The store's hum and buzz felt heavier than usual, the lights flickering with restless energy. Then, sometime past 3, it began. Knock. The sound came from the stockroom door, low and deliberate. Luis froze mid-sentence, head cocking toward the back of the store. He frowned. Knock, knock, knock. The sound reverberated through the air, too solid, too patient. Not like pipes or settling walls. This was knuckles on wood. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach knotted. My throat closed up around words that wouldn't come. "Tude," Luis whispered, grinning as though he couldn't quite believe it. "Is that—" "No way." "Don't," my voice cracked. "Don't touch it. Don't answer." Luis's grin, widened disbelief, flashing across his face like a kid daring himself to walk into a haunted house. He set his energy drink on the counter with exaggerated slowness. "You're telling me," he said, mock-serious, "that if I open that door, some boogeyman's going to drag me off?" The knocking came again, harder now. Knock, knock, knock. "Luis," I hissed. My heart hammered in my chest so hard I thought it might burst. "Please, don't." He winked. "Relax. It's probably rats. Or Harlow messing with us. Watch this." Before I could move, before I could grab his arm, Luis strode across the linoleum floor. His sneakers squeaked softly with each step. He reached the stockroom door and wrapped his hand around the knob. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Luis glanced back at me with a theatrical grin. Then he pulled the door open. Darkness waited on the other side. Not the kind you get from a room with no light bulb. No, this was thicker, like tar, swallowing even the faint spill of fluorescent glow from the store. The air rushing out was cold, damp, wrong. Luis leaned in. "Hello," he called into the black. Something moved. I didn't see it. I didn't need to. The shift in the air was enough, the sudden drop in temperature, the way the lights overhead flickered violently, buzzing like trapped hornets. The sound that came next wasn't a knock, wasn't a word. It was a rush, like a great exhale, and then Luis was gone, just gone. 1 second he was there, hand on the door, and the next the darkness swallowed him whole. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the shelves, rattled my teeth. I screamed. His name. My voice cracked, bounced back at me against the glass and tile, thin and useless. I stumbled forward, every instinct screaming to fling the door back open, to drag him out. But my legs froze halfway there. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked up as though invisible hands pressed against it. The laminated sheet of rules burned in my mind. If you hear knocking from the stockroom, do not answer. I stumbled back, choking on a sob. The store was silent again, silent in a way that felt alive. I collapsed against the counter, clutching the edge until my knuckles went white. My breath came ragged, shuddering. The buzzing light seemed louder, the shadows deeper. When I finally forced myself to move, to check, the only thing left by the door was Luis's name tag. It lay face up on the linoleum, the little pin bent, as though it had been ripped free. In the rush, I picked it up with shaking hands. The metal felt cold, colder than it should have been. I held it to my chest and tried not to cry. The hours that followed crawled past in a haze. I sat behind the counter staring at the door, waiting for it to open, for Luis to stumble back out with a stupid grin and some smart remark. But it never moved. The silence pressed heavier with every minute. And that's when I understood. The rules weren't a joke. They weren't a prank. They weren't even warnings. They were a lifeline. Break them, and you're gone. The store felt emptier without him. Every hum of the refrigerator, every buzz of the light seemed sharper, crueler. His absence was a hole that swallowed the air, a silence that screamed louder than any sound. I held his name tag in my palm until dawn bled across the desert sky, painting the horizon in pale bruises of light. I didn't call anyone. I didn't move. I just sat there, heart hollow, waiting for the sun like it might burn away the truth. It didn't. The strangers on the road. The night after Luis vanished, the silence inside the store felt heavier than ever. Even when the refrigerators hummed and the fluorescent lights buzzed, it didn't feel like sound anymore. It felt like pressure, like the store itself was leaning in, waiting to see if I would crack. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stockroom door, saw the moment Luis winked at me and vanished into blackness that didn't make sense. I told myself that if I could just keep my head down, just follow the rules, I'd make it through my shifts. No mistakes, no slip-ups. But people kept coming. The first was a family. Just after midnight, headlights flared across the empty lot, slicing through the fog that never seemed to lift anymore. A tan minivan rolled up, its tires crunching against gravel in a rhythm too slow, too deliberate. A man stepped out, then a woman, then two kids who didn't look older than 10. On the surface, they seemed normal enough, tired travelers, stretching, their legs brushing dust from their coats. But something was wrong. The kids didn't speak. They didn't fidget or complain the way kids usually do on long trips. They just stood side by side in the cold glow of the overhead lights, hands at their sides, staring straight ahead. Their eyes were too bright, glassy, like the shine of a camera flash caught in the pupils. The father came inside first. He smiled. At me, wide and stiff, like someone imitating how humans smile. His breath fogged up the glass door, even though the night outside wasn't that cold. "Evenin'," he said, his voice too smooth, like it had been practiced. The mother followed, walking slowly, her heels clicking against the tile in perfect rhythm, like a metronome. Neither of them blinked enough. I tried to play it normal, rang up their sodas, their bag of chips, their gas. But I couldn't stop watching the kids through the glass. They hadn't moved an inch, just stared into the fog like they were waiting for something to step out of it. When the father reached for his wallet, I caught it, his nails. They were too long, curling just slightly at the edges, yellow-gray like brittle plastic. I forced myself not to react. I kept my breathing even, my tone casual. I didn't look them in the eyes longer than a second. They left without incident. But when they climbed back into the minivan and pulled out of the lot, the kids' heads turned in unison, too perfectly timed, their glassy eyes fixed on me until the fog swallowed them whole. I gripped the counter until my knuckles ached. Didn't stop there. An hour later, a truck pulled in. The engine rumbled low, guttural, like an animal growling. I recognized the kind of rig, an 18-wheeler, the sort that usually blasted through the desert without stopping. But this one eased into the lot like it was stalking prey. The driver came in for coffee. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a trucker's cap pulled low. His boots echoed against the tile as he moved. He never looked at me, not once. He kept his gaze fixed on the floor, his jaw tight. His face looked wrong, too flat, too pale, like skin stretched thin across a frame that didn't quite fit. When I asked if he wanted anything else, his mouth twitched, but he didn't speak. His silence pressed in around us, heavier than the store's hum. When he finally slid a crumpled bill across the counter, his hands shook like he was holding something back, or like something inside him wanted out. He took his coffee and left without looking up. But when the truck pulled out of the lot, I swear, the trailer door rattled like something inside was pounding to get out. I almost called the manager then, almost. But the thought of explaining Luis, of explaining the family, the kids, the trucker who wouldn't look at me, froze me in place. What could I even say? That the customers weren't right? That their shadows stretched too long across the floor when they walked past the cooler lights? No one would believe me. By the time the third visitor came, my nerves were frayed down to threads. She arrived alone. A young woman in a denim jacket, hair pulled back into a messy braid. She looked normal at first. Too normal, maybe. Her steps quick, her movements purposeful. She came straight up to the counter, leaning in close. Her breath hitched like she'd been running. "Don't let them in," she whispered. Her voice was sharp, urgent. Her eyes darted to the windows, to the door, to the stockroom in the back. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. You'll know when it happens. Just don't let them in." Then she turned and left as fast as she'd come, slipping into the fog without even buying anything. The door closed behind her with a hollow thud, and I was alone again, alone with her words burning in my ears. Don't let them in. I sat behind the counter the rest of the night, eyes glued to the windows, watching the fog shift and curl. Every set of headlights that cut through it made my chest tighten. Every shape moving beyond the glass made my throat dry. Patterns were forming. These weren't travelers, not really. They didn't move right, didn't speak right, didn't look at me the way people should. The family with glassy eyes, the trucker who wouldn't meet my gaze, the young woman who knew more than she would say. The gas station wasn't just a stop in the desert. It was something else, a checkpoint, a crossing point, between here and wherever they came from, and I was stuck in the middle, holding the rules like a shield made of paper, praying it would be enough. Second broken rule, by the time my third week started, exhaustion wasn't just gnawing at me. It was a part of me. My bones felt brittle, my eyelids heavy, my thoughts sluggish, as if my head were packed with wet sand. The rules were the only thing keeping me upright. Every night I read them again, slowly, carefully, as though my life depended on every letter. Because it did. But no matter how hard I tried, weariness crept in. Every long night blurred into the next. The buzzing of the overhead lights and the constant hum of the refrigerators blended into a single droning lullaby, threatening to drag me under. I'd catch myself staring at nothing, my vision going soft, seconds slipping away without me realizing. It was a mistake waiting to happen. That night the air felt different even before it began, charged, thick like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Each breath tasted metallic, as if I were breathing in a mouthful of pennies. I thought maybe it was in my head, some side effect of not sleeping enough. But then the clock on the register read 3:15 a.m., and I made the mistake. My eyes drifted to the window. I didn't mean to. God knows I didn't mean to. But my head was heavy in my hands, and I lifted it just slightly to stretch my neck, and in that fleeting instant, my gaze slid past the glass and out toward the pumps. That's when I saw them. Shapes, not people, not animals, not anything that belonged here. They were shifting masses crawling across the asphalt, dragging themselves from the fog with movements that made my stomach twist. They didn't walk or slither. They unfolded, contorted, bent at angles that broke the rules of anatomy. Their limbs, or what looked like limbs, were too long, bending both ways at once, stretching and snapping back like shadows pulled by invisible hands. The pumps groaned under their weight, hoses twitching. Like snakes as the figures slithered around them, their skin shimmered as though made of heat haze, a constant distortion that never settled into one form. I tried to shut my eyes, but curiosity burned like acid. I couldn't look away. The buzzing of the lights overhead grew louder, angrier, like the electricity itself knew I'd made a mistake. And then I blinked. In that single heartbeat, everything changed. One of the shapes was gone from the lot, and something was inside the store. The hum of the coolers faltered, sputtering off beat. The overhead lights flickered, painting the aisles in broken strobes of shadow and color. I didn't move. Couldn't move. My hands clenched the edge of the counter until my nails bit into the wood. The air thickened, heavy, hot, like I was standing too close to a power transformer. Ozone burned the inside of my nose, sharp and electric. Then I heard it. A sound behind me, not footsteps. Something else. A scrape and a pull, like wet fabric dragged across tile. The smell grew stronger, ozone mixed with something fouler, like meat left too long in the sun. I remembered the rule then, as clear as if someone had spoken it aloud inside my head. Do not speak, if spoken to by something you don't recognize. Froze. My throat tightened. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would shake the shelves around me. Hello. The voice came from the back of the store. It didn't sound right. The word dragged, stretched too long, each syllable echoing in ways that didn't belong in the narrow aisles. It was a mimicry, like a recording warped by water damage. I stared at the countertop, at the register, at anything but the shadows flickering in my peripheral vision. Hello, it said again, closer this time. The lights above me stuttered and went black for a second, plunging everything into pitch darkness. When they snapped back on, I caught a glimpse in the convex security mirror above the aisle. Something stood between the shelves. It didn't have a face. Not really. Its head was a blur of shifting textures, skin and shadow, and something like glass, constantly rearranging. Its limbs were uneven, one arm too long, fingers twitching against the floor. Its body didn't fit its reflection in the mirror. One was always a half-beat behind the other. It tilted its head. The sound of cartilage snapping filled the silence. "Dow, you know me?" it asked. My lips trembled. My tongue felt heavy. The urge to answer, to acknowledge it, to prove I wasn't losing my mind, it burned in me. I wanted to scream, to demand what it was, what it wanted, but the rule echoed louder than that urge, "Do not speak." I kept my mouth shut. The thing in the aisle shifted, its movements jagged as though the body it wore was too tight, too constricting. It scraped its two long fingers along the shelves, knocking over cans and candy bars, each crash echoing too loud in the flickering light. "Say it," the voice commanded. The tone cracked like splitting ice, vibrating in my skull. I squeezed. My eyes shut. My nails dug crescents into my palms. My throat locked. Silence. The thing waited. And waited. When I didn't answer, the air seemed to split apart. A high, shrill whine filled the store, like feedback from a speaker jammed into my ears. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, holding on to the pain as my anchor. Then, just like that, it was gone. The light steadied. The hum of the coolers returned. The metallic taste in the air faded. I opened my eyes slowly. The aisle was empty, save for the trail of scattered items the thing had knocked over, but something lingered. A smear across the tiles where its fingers had dragged, a residue that shimmered like oil on water before soaking into the floorboards, leaving nothing behind. I sat there, shaking, my breath ragged, staring at the clock. 3:22 a.m. 7 minutes. That was all it took. 7 minutes to prove the rules weren't just guidelines, they were survival, and I had broken one. The rules didn't forgive mistakes, not twice. The regulars. Not everyone who walks through the doors at night is a stranger. That realization came slowly, pieced together from the faces I kept seeing. People who returned again and again, bound to this place, as if the gas station weren't just a pit stop, but part of their orbit. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but the longer I worked, the more I understood. These weren't just customers. They were something else. Survivors, maybe. Or participants in whatever cruel game the rules had trapped me inside. The first was Old Man Harris. I'd seen him in daylight before, years back, long before I started working the graveyard shift. He lived a few miles down the road in a sagging farmhouse half swallowed by weeds. People said he was half senile, muttering at things no one else could see. But when he shuffled in one night just after midnight, his cloudy eyes locked on mine with a sharpness that startled me. He didn't buy anything, didn't browse. He just leaned on the counter, yellowed fingernails scratching against the laminate, and whispered, "You keep to the rules, boy. Every damn one. You slip up even once, you'll wish you hadn't been born." I froze. The rules weren't posted anywhere, not outside the back office. I'd never spoken them aloud to anyone. "How do you—" I started. He raised a gnarled finger and cut me off. "Don't ask. Asking opens doors best left shut." Then, as if satisfied with the warning, he picked up a pack of jerky and shuffled out into the night, not once looking back. From then on, Harris became a fixture. Sometimes he'd come in just to sit in the corner booth, nursing a black coffee until dawn. Sometimes he'd mutter half-coherent advice under his breath, things like, "Don't trust the shadows near the cooler," or, "If the phone rings twice after 2, let it ring." Every time, he left me rattled. Every time, I listened. Then, there was Jess. She was a trucker, mid-30s, with dark hair always tucked beneath a frayed cap and a leather jacket that smelled faintly of diesel. Jess had the kind of easy confidence that made you want to trust her, even when her eyes told a different story. Sharp, watchful, like she was always scanning for something waiting just beyond the edge of vision. She rolled in every few nights, filling her rig and grabbing a cup of burnt coffee before heading out again. But she lingered longer than most, leaning on the counter, striking up small talk. "You look tired," she said once, after I nearly dropped a carton of cigarettes, stacking the shelves. "Occupational hazard," I muttered. Her gaze flicked toward the rules taped inside the office door, barely visible from where she stood. "Don't tell me you've been breaking them." My blood went cold. You know about the rules?" Jess smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was knowing, bitter. "Everyone who lasts more than a week knows about the rules. Doesn't mean we all follow them. Doesn't mean we all get out." She didn't elaborate, just tossed a crumpled bill onto the counter and walked out, leaving the smell of gasoline and something older, rust maybe, or blood, in her wake. After that, I started watching her more closely. Her hands shook sometimes, just barely, when she held her cup. Her eyes lingered too long on the dark windows, like she was waiting for them to shift. Jess wasn't just surviving here. She was running from something. And I couldn't tell if the gas station was her refuge or her trap. And then there was the tall woman. The first time I saw her, I thought she was just another customer. She ducked through the door, towering nearly a foot above me, her long hair spilling down her back in waves that seemed too heavy to belong to a human head. She wore a pale dress, one that brushed against the tile floor no matter how tall she stood. She didn't speak, didn't smile. She only stood in the corner of the store watching me. Her eyes, if they were eyes, didn't blink. I tried to ignore her, ringing up a man buying beer, but when I looked back, she was standing closer. That was when the knocking began. It came from the stockroom door, slow, deliberate. A memory of Louise surged through me like a stab. The laughter, the sudden silence, the name tag left behind. My stomach twisted. I froze. The rules screamed inside my head. "Don't open the door if you hear knocking," but the sound grew louder. The customer at the counter didn't react at all. He slid his money across and left, whistling as if nothing was wrong. The knocking turned into pounding. The door rattled on its hinges. I staggered backward, and that's when the tall woman moved. In a blink, she was beside me, her long hand closing around my arm. Her fingers were ice cold, thin as bone. She didn't look at me, just at the stockroom door. The pounding stopped. Silence thickened. And then, slowly, the tall woman released me and stepped back. Without a word, she walked to the front entrance, ducked through it, and disappeared into the fog. I stood shaking behind the counter for what felt like hours, waiting for the stockroom door to burst open. It never did. I don't know if she saved me, or if she was only keeping me alive until something worse arrived. But she became another regular. Every few nights she returned, never speaking, never buying anything, just watching. Sometimes she would linger near the windows, and when she did, nothing ever tried to get inside. Other times she stood near the rules posted in the office, her head cocked like she was reading them. Harris muttered once, after she left, "Don't ever follow her out. She don't walk roads you can come back from." Jess only scowled when I mentioned the tall woman. "She's not your friend, remember that." And so I kept my distance. But deep down I knew, whether human or not, whether savior or predator, the tall woman was tied to this place as much as I was. Piece by piece the picture started to form. I wasn't the first. Others had worked here before me. Most didn't last. Some had Harris's scars, Jess's paranoia. Others had simply vanished, leaving behind fragments. A bent key on the floor, a bloodstain scrubbed too clean, a name tag glinting in the stockroom dust. The gas station wasn't just a job. It was a checkpoint, a sieve, a place where rules were the only lifeline in a current designed to drag you under. And the regulars? They weren't customers. They were survivors, or ghosts, maybe both. The night I realized that, I felt something shift in me. Fear, yes, but also belonging, a horrible kind of camaraderie, knowing that we were all trapped together in this thing none of us could name. The gas station didn't just eat people, it kept some of us too. Second major encounter. The rules had become my lifeline. I didn't just read them anymore, I clung to them. Every word on that stained sheet of paper was survival distilled into ink. They were more than guidelines. They were the only barrier between me and whatever waited on the other side of the glass. Which is why, the night I broke one, I knew immediately something had shifted. It started with something as stupid as a spill. The stockroom coffee machine had been sputtering all night, coughing up bitter sludge into the carafe. A trucker, someone I didn't recognize, someone with two wide eyes who didn't linger, grabbed a cup and staggered out without replacing the lid. I didn't even notice until the dark pool had spread across the tile near aisle 3, seeping. Sticky and slow under the candy rack, the air smelled burnt and sour, like wet soil mixed with ash. Instinct told me to grab the mop. My body moved before my brain caught up. The ragged head of the mop dragged against the floor, soaking up the mess while my mind ticked over the rules like a metronome. I knew them. I repeated them. I kept them, like a prayer, but one slipped past me. Never leave the counter unattended. For more than 60 seconds, it was supposed to be simple. The counter was a kind of anchor, a place where the air didn't quite hum with wrongness. Leaving it was always a gamble. I was so focused on scrubbing up the dark puddle that I didn't realize how much time had passed until the hum in the room changed. I froze mid-motion, mop dripping onto the tiles. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in jagged pulses like a dying insect caught in a jar. The air grew thicker, no, heavier, as if something had pressed its hand over the entire building. My chest constricted. I dropped the mop and stumbled back to the counter. My eyes snapped to the office door where the rules were taped. Gone. The paper wasn't there. Just an empty stretch of cheap wood, blank and bare, as though it had never been taped at all. "No," I whispered, breath-catching. "No, no, no." I clawed at the wall, searching for a corner of tape, a scrap of paper. Anything, nothing. The rules were missing. My lifeline had been ripped away. That was when the first light blew out. A sharp pop cracked overhead, followed by a hiss as one of the bulbs went black. The others followed one after another like gunshots echoing down the aisle. Each time, the store got darker, shadows deepening and lengthening until the corners bled into a solid wall of night. The hum in the air became a vibration I could feel in my teeth. The smell hit next. Copper, sharp and thick, the metallic tang of blood, carried on a current that shouldn't exist indoors. My stomach turned bile-burning at the back of my throat. Something moved in the dark. I heard it before I saw it. A dragging sound, nails across glass, high and sharp enough to set my nerves on fire. My eyes snapped toward the front windows, and there, just beyond the thin pane of glass, shadows crawled, not people, not animals, shapes. They pressed against the glass as if trying to force their way inside, bodies smearing like liquid shadows, faces stretching too long, mouths forming. Too many teeth. Their limbs were wrong, jagged, bent at impossible angles, and each time their hands dragged down the door, the glass shuddered under the pressure. I stumbled back behind the counter, heart hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. A wet squeal filled the room as cracks spiderwebbed through the glass, inch by inch. I could see the inside of their mouths now, black voids dripping something thick and dark that hissed when it hit the floor outside. The rules. I needed the rules. I tore through the drawers, ripping papers out, tossing receipts, wrappers, anything in reach. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely grip the edges. The shadows pressed harder. One slammed its head against the glass, leaving a bloom of black across the pane that didn't fade. Another dragged its tongue along the surface, leaving streaks that sizzled like acid. My breathing grew ragged. The store felt smaller, walls bending inward, ceiling lowering until I swore I could feel it brushing my hair. Then I felt the first drop. Something wet hit my cheek, warm, sticky. I wiped it away and my hand came back red. Blood. I looked up. The ceiling tiles above me bulged as if something crawled inside them, pressing down. More drops fell, pattering against my skin, against the counter, forming tiny pools that glistened under the last flickering light. The scratching turned into pounding. The doors rattled on their hinges, each slam threatening to burst them inward. I pressed myself against the counter, back digging into the laminate, whispering the rules aloud even though I didn't have the paper anymore. Don't open the door if you hear knocking. Don't speak if spoken to by something you don't recognize. Don't leave the counter for more than 60 seconds. The words tumbled out, half sobbed, half screamed. The last light flickered once, twice, then blew. Darkness swallowed the store whole. For a heartbeat there was silence. No scratching, no pounding. Just the ringing of blood in my ears. Then, something breathed right next to me. Hot air brushed the side of my face, carrying the same metallic stink as the blood dripping from the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, too close. My skin prickled with gooseflesh. I didn't dare turn. I didn't dare move. The glass doors shuddered one last time before the pounding ceased altogether. Whatever pressed against them withdrew, fading back into the night, and just as suddenly as it started, the pressure lifted. The air loosened. The hum died away. One by one, the lights flickered back to life, buzzing overhead like nothing had happened. The blood was gone. The cracks in the glass had vanished. The mop lay dry on the floor where I'd dropped it. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it all. A hallucination born of exhaustion and fear. Then I saw it. The rules sheet, neatly folded, sitting on the counter where I'd been cowering seconds earlier. But it wasn't the same. The paper was damp, edges curling, and the ink bled in places as if someone had dragged wet fingers across it. And there, scrawled in a line I knew hadn't been there before, was a new sentence. The rules are not your shield. They are your leash. I stared at it until my vision blurred, the words searing into my brain like a brand. That night, I didn't move from the counter again. Not for a second. Not even when my legs cramped, not even when my eyes burned from the fluorescent glare. I knew then the rules weren't just about survival, they were about control. And something was pulling the strings.